And I'll try to reach out to Rochelle again because I haven't reached her yet. Oops, we can't hear you if you unmute.
Very rotten. I knew that. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'd love to hear who's out there to talk to. I know a lot of the people, but Kim, who is Kim?
I am Kim Berge, and my husband and I have vegetables, but we used to do dairy cows. So you helped us when we had a brown Swiss that you came and you helped us with. That was a long time ago.
Awesome. Okay. I know Miss Susie. I've known Susie for many years. Amanda, I just met. Cody Buse, I've met. Robert. Who's Robert?
Robert Thom. Thom.
Oh, yeah. Mr. Thom. Okay. Of course I know Mr. Thom. Okay. Raina Incognito as Rain Reynolds and Miss Pratt. Brenda Mowery. Tell me about who you are, Brenda.
Can you hear me?
I can.
I live in the interior, and I'm interested in sheep, and I'm concerned about this the MO vine.
Sure.
And I don't have sheep, but I've been around sheep for many years.
Thinking about getting sheep.
Yes, and I'm interested in the feasibility of being in the interior when we have such deep snow and short summers.
Okay. And Alan Wills. That's a new name I don't know.
Hi, it's more Barbara, but I'm on my husband's phone, Alan, so I'm Barbara Wills. I've heard of you, Sabrieta, but I've never had the opportunity to meet you. I've got dairy cattle, dairy goats down here in Soldotna, Sterling area. Oh, now I have a caribou face.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, I think your name is spelled Barbara with one last A, right?
Yes, like Barbara Streisand. Thank you,
Mom.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen the name before. Right on. Okay, cats. I can guarantee I know who Miss Cat is. Vern Stockwell is a name I've heard a lot. Vern, do you have sheep or goats?
No, I'm just a vegetable farmer. I live out here in the Butte, just probably down the road from you a little ways off Rosenberg over here.
Right on. So we probably get totes of carrots from you once in a while in the fall, huh?
I don't know.
Okay.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
In our call-in user.
Yeah.
Who is our call-in user? There's someone beside you that doesn't have a name. Haven't quite seen who that is. They're on a telephone.
Oh.
Emma. Well, we'll see when they come back on. All right. Well, that's pretty awesome. It looks like there's someone here from every corner of the state except Southeast, so that's kind of cool. I'm Sabrieta Holland. I have a business myself in the Butte, Kinnick River Veterinary Services. I also enjoy raising livestock, Kinnick River Ranch there in the Butte, and these new regulations that are going to be going into effect in the next month or two are not any sort of regulations that I have 1 ounce of say over. It's just my job to follow them. So I help people navigate the system and to follow the rules. I don't really have much of any opinion on them one way or the other from this perspective. Maybe I do as a farmer, but not as a veterinarian. I just help people navigate the rules. Now, one thing that's really interesting is that when animals are coming up from out of state, it's the job of the veterinarian that is writing the paperwork down south for you to do all this. Has nothing to do with me. However, it can be quite tedious and tricky and timely, and so sometimes people will ask me to just do it for them. And I will hire a veterinarian at the other end and help them go ahead and fulfill the obligations. There's some, whether you're driving through Canada, which I've done many times, or flying here, or barging here, or however you're getting to Alaska, the regulations are tedious. Not so bad for goats. Goats are really not that bad at all, but sheep, quite a few more regulations. I'm going to actually go online for a minute. I don't know if you can see my screen or not. I think you still see me. Is that right? Can you all tell me if you see me or the screen?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll go through it. So the new regulation was requested by the higher ups in Alaska state government. They requested that Dr. Gerlach, who's our state veterinarian, to go ahead and write these regulations for people to follow to bring sheep into Alaska. It does not mean that he, again, has any opinion about the regulations or how worthwhile they are or anything like that. It's just been requested that he write them. And so my understanding that those are going to go into effect in the next month or so. I believe the sheep that I just brought up a week ago are the last load that's come to Alaska that will not have to follow these regulations from here forward. They're going to have to follow them. And so there's a strange bug called mycoplasma ovinuminae, and it's not exactly a bacteria, not exactly a virus. It's kind of something in between. Hard to grow, hard to find, and it doesn't necessarily make the animal by itself sick. It just makes the animal more susceptible to being sick to everything else. And what I think is part of the hang up with people understanding the significance of the disease is that we have such a low burden in our state of infectious disease. I mean, it's crazy sometimes. When I go out of state and I go into a herd and I run a screen on them just to see whether that herd is going to work coming to Alaska, and I am blown away by the number of bugs that the herds have. And trying to find a herd that is clean of everything is really, really difficult. And when herds that have been in Alaska for a long time, especially if they've been closed, are generally negative for most of those things. And again, we don't tend to have near as many sick animals. So I think it can be difficult for people to understand the whole disease process from that perspective. Is that the mycoplasma is kind of sets everything else off. It's not necessarily a primary invader that makes the animal sick. So what they're proposing is that the animal have a negative test for mycoplasma in order to come to Alaska. Now, that's an interesting question because there are multiple tests for mycoplasma, and there's not very many laboratories that will run them. The laboratory that I pretty much stuck with is Washington Animal Disease and Diagnostic Lab, which is in Pullman, Washington. It's a branch of Washington State. And the two different tests that they offer are what's called an ELISA, enzyme-linked immunosorbent assay. And ELISA just runs a titer, which is runs an antibody. The antibody test, let's see, there's several things to understand about that test. One is it just says that the animal's been exposed to this particular bug. There's some debate whether different strains of MOV, which is short for Mycoplasma ovinuminae, it's possible that ELISA kind of is a blanket for all MOVs and maybe not for the ones that are specifically pathogenic, but nevertheless, it's an available test. So the ELISA is an antibody test. It's fairly fast. I would say a week or two, maybe. It's not too expensive, $25, $50, depends on whether you're in state, out of state, how much, how the veterinarian that draws the sample charges for the test. Do they charge for the time, or they charge by a test, or whatever. Then there's the PCR test, polymerase chain reaction. The PCR test tests for the actual DNA of the bug. Now, one thing that I really like about the PCR test is it's pretty definitive. Either the critter, if it's a positive PCR, then they have the bug. It's present in their nostrils. And one of the another positive thing about it is it's not the same as a culture. And a culture is easy to kill and hard to grow. And so in that respect, it's not like you draw it on a Thursday and, oh, snap, it's going to be negative come Tuesday. No, PCR, if it's got DNA in it, it's going to be there forever. You're not really gonna lose it. I mean, within reason, you're not going to. It does, though, require when the tester runs it that it not use the usual Q-tips, so to speak, cotton-based Q-tips that the average practitioner has on their truck in order to use for cultures. It's a different swab. The swab needs to be synthetic so that it doesn't have other DNA to cloud the PCR test, if that makes sense. And so if you're a purist, you need to have these special PCR swabs. And so sometimes if the lab or veterinarian that I hire to go out and do the work happens not to have that on their truck and doesn't have time to spend an hour finding it, doesn't want to buy a box of 200, and doesn't want to wait 2 weeks for it to show up, well, then I'll just order it and have it sent to them to help them out in order to, make sure they got the right stuff for the job. So there's PCRs, there's ELISAs. ELISA is the antibody that requires a red top blood tube, and the PCR is testing for the DNA. The other thing I might add for the ELISA is, thank you.
Dr. Holland, could I just wanted to let you know you can now share your screen if you'd like to. We fixed that.
Oh, okay. All right. I guess I decided to just kind of like talk, so I'm going to go with that for right now.
That sounds good. We're enjoying it.
Evacuate the herd that came in here. We'll let the puppy out if you can help us, please. So there's the ELISA and the PCR. Now, one thing I might add is that a lot of farmers in Alaska are really crafty and resourceful, and they do a great job at drawing blood on their goats and sheep. And so sometimes they think they're just going to go do that where their sheep and goats are, that they're going to import into Alaska. And that is not going to happen. Number one, sample handling is really crucial when it comes to regulatory testing. You can't just send a sample in with the serum and the blood not separated, not with cold packs, not centrifuge down and put back into a special tube in order to make the serum the quality of the submission to be adequate. So, the veterinarian needs to, kind of sign their name on the dotted line that they identified this animal and matched it to this blood sample. So, the ELISAs and the PCRs are the two tests, and my understanding are going to be your options. There are some other tests that are a curiosity that I'm kind of interested in, but they're not really validated is the term they use. But ELISAs, PCRs for MOV. I don't know how recently that's going to need to be done from when the animals come into Alaska. I think it's probably going to be within 30 days. Hopefully that's going to be enough time for the PCR. Sometimes a lot of things need to happen, and it's not that we expect the PCR to take a month, but if it takes 2 weeks and we've eaten up 2 weeks of our 30 days time that we're waiting, and the lamb is growing by the day, maybe a pound a day, that's kind of a problem when you're trying to fly them up. The next thing that seems to be a bit of a change that was not there last year, I don't know if anybody else noticed it, moving away from the mycoplasma discussion. Before we leave there, maybe I should ask, does anybody have questions on that? The cost on the PCR, I want to say, is $90, $120 an animal. The ELISA is $25, $50. It just depends, if you're paying out-of-state fees or in-state fees or what. Or what laboratory. I'm sure at some of the other laboratories in the rest of the country, they're going to be a whole lot more. No questions. Okay. The next thing that I've noticed that has changed, I have not had a chance to talk to Dr. Gerlach about it yet, is that I've noticed that the Scrapie gene testing has now no longer says just for rams. It says for all sheep, and that is interesting and is going to be difficult. And the options for Scrapie is kind of requirement number 2 on the list, is you can either buy from a Scrapie export certified herd. Now, a Scrapie export certified herd means that the USDA federal veterinarian comes and looks at your herd every year and gets an inventory list and verifies the inventory list. Every animal that you have that dies, you submit the brain for Scrapie testing. Scrapie is a prion bug. It's kind of the sheep version of mad cow and Creutzfeldt Jakob disease in people and that kind of thing. So it is another weirdo bug. Now, it's a really interesting reason why the heck we would want genetic testing for Scrapie. So if you find a Scrapie export certified herd to buy the breed of animal that you want, that's great. But those are few and far between. And for some breeds, there is not a single Scrapie USDA export certified herd in the U.S. for that breed, not one. And that's a problem. A few years ago, there was no export certified herd of Scottish blackface to be found. And that brings another complication, which is the option B. So if you don't have an export certified herd, it takes 5 years to get that status. So you start out on day 1, and every year your federal veterinarian comes and checks your herd and does a inventory update. They need to have a Scrapie ear tag in their ear, and that has your herd number on it. Took me 3 rounds of ordering to get that tag just exactly the way that they wanted it on my particular herd. And so if you don't have an export certified herd, then the other option is to gene test the lambs. Now, gene testing the lambs is because there's there's 2 genes that are known to be resistant to Scrapie. And if the sheep has one copy, one of the 2, they get one copy of the gene from the mama and one copy of the gene from the papa. And if they have one copy of a gene that is resistant to Scrapie, then that means that the animal is highly unlikely to get the disease. And so the animal is allowed to enter Alaska. Now, that sounds all great and wonderful, but what if there is not one single animal in the entire breed of the sheep that you want that has that gene? Then you have to find an export certified herd. So, and that's what I found with the Scottish blackface a few years ago. Is I tested, I think, 3 herds. One, a large herd in Nevada, another in Wisconsin, and another in Georgia. And not one herd had one single copy of a Scrapie-resistant gene. And so all that money had been spent trying to screen this herd, and so they were used a year trying to find a lamb. By the time we got done with the 3rd herd, all the lambs were too big to fly to Alaska by then. So, we kind of had to give up on that. But and the other thing that's really interesting is that for the Scrapie resistance genes, is that when you talk to people in the UK and the rest of the world, what you find is they'll say, oh yeah, of course, all the sheep here have the Scrapie resistant gene. What are you talking about? All Scottish blackface are resistant. And the reason why they're saying that is because they have a different, and I can't even tell you how long it took me to figure this out, so you're just getting it right now, just easy, is that their strain of Scrapie is different than our strain of Scrapie. So their Scrapie resistant gene, the capital A gene, is different from the gene that we need, which is the capital R gene. Now, so we need the capital R gene in order to be functionally resistant to Scrapie. And the idea from the USDA is that eventually if you require everything to have this R gene or this A gene coming to Alaska, pretty soon the whole state's going to have, A or R gene sheep, and nobody's ever going to get scrapie, and then we won't ever have to worry about it anymore. But it is a little frustrating for some of those small gene pools of breeds that just don't possess that. And so those breeds have to go on the Scrapie Export Certified program. And a lot of them will tell you that they're on the program, but they won't tell you whether they're export certified. They won't know that difference. Or they'll get the Scrapie tags and think that they're on the program and have a herd number, but they're not getting inspected every year, or they're not turning in a head for animals when they're slaughtered. So you have to go to the USDA list and see whether they're legit or not that year. You can't just take their word for it, or you're going to spend boatload of money and then find out that they're not. So anyway, so that's the scrapie thing. The rules in Alaska say that they either they say codon 136 or codon 171. So what codon means is it just means the milepost on the DNA spiral helix, like where it's at. It's a milepost. It's codon 136 or codon 171. Now, if it's the AA codon, problem is we don't have. I don't think this is what I've been told, and what my understanding is. We don't even have that strain of scrapie, so I don't even understand why that is allowed, unless that's an oversight or a loophole or something. But it is a little bit helpful, for example, with the Scottish blackface, because all of them are AA, and so maybe that's why. Maybe they've allowed a loophole in order to get some of those breeds in, but it's a loophole, and because we don't have that strain of scrapie, so allowing them in is really not helpful to the scrapie situation. I don't understand that. So anyway, but that's what that's worth. Let's see. So for the scrapie, in order to get DNA, you really need a piece of the animal, and that is problematic for some critters. For a cow, it's super easy to just take a skin biopsy punch and a piece of wood and just punch a hole through the ear and walk away, and it's faster than, you don't even need a head shoot for it. But it doesn't work so good for sheep, and they're usually white sheep, and they usually bleed a lot, so it just doesn't look good. So usually the favorite way to do scrapie testing is actually when the lambs get their tails docked, because there's a whole piece of the animal there that's coming off anyway. So if you want to buy a breed of sheep that gets its tails docked, then that's the perfect way to do it. Is you send in a piece of their tail, and it gets tested, and then it also decreases the cost. You don't need blood draws. You don't have to send it in, with a serum separator and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, that's the scrapie testing. That takes some time, and there's only 3 laboratories in the United States that are certified to run those tests. So you got to find a laboratory that is that's what you need. So now you're starting to see why sometimes people will just ask me to just do it for them, because it gets a little overwhelming. Because again, you're fighting the clock. You're fighting the clock trying to get all this testing done and be compliant before the animal gets too big to be shipped. And usually getting shipped, the maximum weight seems to coincide with about 60 pounds. If they're Suffolks, then it might even be less than that. Sometimes they're 80 pounds when they're weaned, so they're not even weaned and they're already overweight. So the mycoplasma test you're waiting on.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
This is Kat, by the
Emma.
way. I've heard there is another way of getting a sample from sheep that is doing a hole punch in the ear before you're doing the tag.
Yeah, that's what I was
sending
trying
the
to
tag in?
talk about. Yeah, it's the same as cows. You can do a little ear punch.
Oh, with the bleeding.
They do. Yeah, they do make an ear tag that punches out a piece of ear with the tag and hands you a little container with the piece in it. And so yes, you can do that, but they do bleed. and I, sometimes people get bent out of shape when there's blood everywhere, and you can't stop it. There's a hole in their ear and there's 50 million sheep with blood everywhere, and they just don't like it. So,
Right.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, you can do that.
And I have
And it
part
works.
2 of the question. Can the lambs be codon tested by parentage?
I don't think so. No. And no. I've asked that question before.
Okay.
Good question. No. And see, the thing is that when it's done by parentage for a registry, then usually all of the stuff is done by the owner. Whereas the purpose of this testing is regulatory. And regulatory means we have a license, we have USDA certification. I mean, you wouldn't believe the days and days and days and days, and the weeks and weeks and weeks, the paperwork and the money and everything that we have to spend every single year to stay certified for doing all this stuff. And they want to know that it's correct, that it was the correct animal. And that kind of brings up a really good question about identification on sheep in general, that it is common for people to just have names for the sheep and for the sheep not to be identified. And I'm about ready to make it a policy that I just won't see the sheep anymore unless they have a federal tag on. It's been quite a challenge from many different directions. I've had a lot of blood work show up with animals' names, that I drew the blood and that they were negative for this, that, and the other, and now the animal's positive. Well, all I know is that they don't come with a title. They don't come with a microchip. They don't come with a driver's license. I can't verify the name, but that's what people expect, and is for you to be able to draw the blood and do this paperwork saying that their animal is free of whatever disease based on the blood work that you drew with a name attached, which I think is completely crazy and should not be allowed for anything. But on the flip side, I am very empathetic that, especially in certain breeds, like cat's breed, that doesn't have a lot of wool around their face, that, and especially with all the woven wire fences that we have around here, that the tags get ripped out all the time. It's very frustrating.
Oh, yeah.
So I do have, small metal tags, and I believe that you can get small metal tags for scrapey screening with a scrapey shield on it, and you can kind of put those in the bottom inside of the ear such that they're not as likely to catch. You can tattoo them. Next to never can you read those tattoos as adults, especially if they're colored sheep, even if it's in green ink. Very hard to read. 840 microchips are really great. They have to go at the base of the ear just in case the animal is ever eaten. The identification is a major deal. And so all this work has to be done by a regulatory veterinarian. A lot of people don't realize, and even some veterinarians, that on a federal basis, veterinarians are now classified as a certain category veterinarian, and not everybody can just do work on livestock or birds. And the category 1 is dogs and cats. Category 2 is poultry and livestock. And so most small animal veterinarians can't do regulatory work, and they have to take special training for it in order to do that. So you want to keep that in mind when you're locating a veterinarian, that you need somebody that's going to actually be able to sign that paperwork, who's going to have the proper tags. You need to have the tags for scrapie or the person you're buying the sheep from needs to have the proper scrapie tags for their herd to transport them, and that can actually be fairly tricky. I think Rain and Mark kind of know how I was pulling my hair out a few years ago trying to get the proper tags for my sheep. I'm pretty sure I ordered them 4 times in one summer before they were finally the right ones, because even the company hadn't realized that the regulations had changed, and tried to send me, anyway, it's a long story. So, having the right tags is important, having the right veterinarian that's categorized and accredited properly, and then, running the MOV test, running the scrapie test is important, and trying to get all of this done before the animal gets too big to ship. And that is a very difficult timeline to work on sometimes. Now, the other thing is that sometimes there's a difference between what the feds want, what the state wants, and then what an airline wants. And so, again, yet another loophole that gets missed frequently is that the airlines want the health certificates good for 10 days. The state will honor a health certificate for 30 days. And so people say, oh, yeah, it's ready. We got everything ready. And then it's the 11th day and they're finally flying because something got delayed for a day and there's not enough room on the freighter and you need to go an extra day. And now your health certificate is not good according to the airline. So just watch that little, that little chicken out there that your health certificates, if they're flying, are only honored for 10 days, just like dogs and cats. But if they're, transporting, then they're good for 30 days. And they need to arrive in Alaska with that health certificate still good, not leave on the 30th day. They have to arrive in Alaska on the 30th day. There's also some discussion about Brucella ovis testing and that kind of stuff, and that is on the website there, the dec.alaska.gov, and that's for rams. So the rams have a higher level of requirements for testing coming into Alaska, and the ewes not quite so much. It used to be that the rams a lot because the scrapie testing only applied last year to the rams, but now apparently applies to everything. So it's making it very difficult to get animals into Alaska. Now, my punchline is that I've been doing a lot of laparoscopic AI in order to skip the import regulations, go ahead and bring in new blood in that method. Everything that's collected in Europe is required to be carry an R gene for scrapie. So anyone who's had AI done on their herd, all of those animals carry at least one R, which going south probably isn't going to matter, but coming north it does. So I don't know that it does anybody much good here, but it's nice to know. But there are some breeds, like Cat Gamble's Katahdins, where there isn't any frozen semen available for their breed. And so that's just not an option for them. And maybe it will be in the future, but right now it's not. So yeah, that's kind of my discussion. You want to, you can still ship cargo on Alaska Airlines. If the animals are oversized, they can still be shipped, but the cost is extremely high. But at least it's possible. And so the animals that are here right now on this day are extremely valuable. So if I see a purebred registered Teeswater on Craigslist for $50, I think I'm gonna, I don't even know what I would say. I hope it doesn't happen, because all of those animals are, not that I've seen one of those, but I'm just saying that if I see any really, nice animals, it's going to be very difficult in the future to get any more animals in except by AI. Embryo transfers on the horizon. We've got one coming in March, actually. Any questions? It's got to be questions, unless you're all asleep.
Dr. Holland, I have a question.
Yeah.
What happens with the concern of animal rights? What happens if a herd here already, who's basically what I'm hearing from you is grandfathered in, shows up testing positive for that? Are they going to be asked to be destroyed, those animals?
No. Nope, nothing like that.
And then transporting animals within the state, it's not too much of a concern.
That's just an individual herd owner's, choice of whether they want to keep their herd closed or not. Like I said, I think it is a minor concern to the herds themselves, the sheep themselves, because it makes them susceptible to other things. I think that when you have animals coming up from out of state, you just wouldn't believe the stuff that they carry. It's insane, and I would. Well, I shouldn't say it's insane. It's normal for the animals down there, but in Alaska, it's not common for our animals to have a whole lot of stuff. All of the cattle viruses, the IBR, BVD, PI3, PRSV, all of those are latently carried by sheep and goats sometimes. And that's yet another loophole for people's cattle herds that they don't think about. Their kid brings in a bottle lamp or something, and they just don't even think about that. They can carry MCF. They can carry the rest of them just slipped my mind. But anyway, there can be a lot of things that they could carry, and when you add MOV on top of that, those are the ones that seem to get sicker.
And then for myself, I have clean pastures with nothing in it on them for years.
Yeah.
Would it behoove me to test before I move animals from within state?
For sure, it would for things like yonis. Like things like yonis, it doesn't matter how long your farm has been fallow without animals. If there was yonis there, there's going to be yonis until we all die. It's just never going away. And it's So it's a good idea to be testing for things, especially if you have family milk cows. That is probably, in my opinion, should be the most protected animal on a farm is a family milk cow. And those animals are, such an integral part of the food source for a family and sometimes income for the family that bringing in untested sheep, goats, calves from other farms is not a good idea.
Thank you very much for your time and all this information.
Yeah, and I, like I said, I don't, it's not necessarily, my point of view of how it should be. I just got to follow it, and I try to help people navigate it, usually people that I normally work for anyway, help them navigate this system and understand that, because a lot of times it's kind of all moving parts with these different ages and how long they take and all that kind of stuff, that it's all got to be done together, timed just right in order for it to be a successful trip. And this last trip that we made was thankfully 2 separate herds that were export certified, and holy cows, that helps so much. And the both farms worked with Oregon State, and they were just wonderful to work with, even though they didn't understand any of these requirements. they were like, say what? We gotta do what? And I'm like, yeah, I know, just do it. Just
What did
run
you
it.
bring? What did you bring in?
So Kat Campbell brought in some breeding rams for her Katahdins, and the farm that I went to retrieve those for her and for another guy, Kevin. Can't remember Kevin Jackson, maybe. He's down on the peninsula.
Yes.
He just an ocean of beautiful quality animals. Oh my gosh, it was so fun to go there. There must have been at least 200 of them, and that ewe lamb that Kevin got was just the cream of the crop. I mean, she was just beautiful, and the lady, just beautiful udders. I bet you could actually milk those sheep. They were beautiful udders, great teats, and that was something that I was kind of hoping that people would get started here as milk goats before these regulations went into effect, and I don't think anybody has so far. But looking at those Katahdin, heck, you might be able to milk one of those. They just looked like they were fantastic mothers, and clean and great udders and really protective.
The milk is very tasty. I can certify that.
Yeah. And then besides that, we brought in Gotlands. Gotlands are, a different kind of wool. Kind of grows in ringlets, so to speak, kind of like a Teeswater. And they are, the ewes are super confident of themselves, shall we say that? And they at least the ones that I was in around, they will eat your lunch if you're not paying attention. They're very excellent mothers, not aggressive, just demanding, and won't let dogs push them around, and just very hardy, great feet and legs, just really nice looking animals. And then we got some Valet Black Nose. We have a purebred embryo imported from New Zealand that's due to be born in one of those Scotlands in March, so that's kind of cool. And then a 3/4 Valet that came up and went to the peninsula, so that's kind of exciting. And right now that particular breed is being looked at as kind of a boutique breed, but I really think they have a lot of promise for other things. They don't really herd like other sheep. They have a extremely long staple length. I mean, right now at this time of year, it's at least 8 inches long, really long, really thick, really luxurious. The animals are not seasonal, which is kind of like merinos, which is a problem if someone is new to sheep and they're not keeping their babies castrated and that kind of stuff. You'll end up with a bunch of popsicle babies. But those things are just the meaty, beefy little things. I bet the young ewe that we brought in was 260 pounds, I think. That's I think one of the bigger ewes I've ever seen in my life, and she's not even grown, and she's huge, and she's not even purebred. I think the purebred ewes are supposed to be 350 pounds, and they're just the nicest sheep, easy to handle, no problem at all, incredible staple length. Just really, they're supposed to be the friendliest sheep in the world. So I think from a meat perspective, those sheep could really have some promise, even though people kind of shudder when I say that at this point in the game. But down the road, I'm sure they'll become a lot more populous than they are now.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other?
No.
No. Right. Anybody bringing any sheep up this year? No? Anybody bringing any goats up this year? No? Okay. Right on. Well, hopefully that helps. Hopefully you're not asleep from regulations.
Is there a link to the new regulations online somewhere?
They're not. Sorry. Go ahead.
It's not up there yet?
No.
Well, I was looking at the website, but that one's still from like 2017.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. And
Sabrieta,
yeah.
it took me a minute to figure out how to unmute. So I am thinking about bringing goats up this year. What do I need to know?
Goats are so much easier. You don't have to go through the strapey thing, I don't think. Hopefully you're planning on flying babies, right?
Hopefully, yes. I'm just kind of starting to look around.
And what breed?
Either Kiko or Boar.
Ooh. Okay. Those it's hard to get them at a healthy age weaned and still make weight flying.
Okay.
And so that's kind of the tricky part on them, that you got to be just on the ball, paying attention to how big they are and how much they weigh and that kind of stuff, because there's a 150-pound overall limit, and those 500 kennels, 500 series kennels weigh between 24 and 26 pounds when they've got their little piece of extra plywood on the bottom, and then you want to add a few pounds for bedding and water. They're required to have bedding and water in there, and so I kind of call them 30 pounds. So that means your max weight of animal flying is 120 pounds, which sounds like it would be easy to get to, but you know, it's not sometimes. The other limiting factor is that they need to be have a few inches clearance of their ears, and some people that work at the airport are very particular about that, and others are not. So it just seems to depend on who you happen to get that day as to how particular they are. And some animals, like the club lambs, are so darn tall, they're like llamas, that you can't, you know, you can't let them get weaned and still give them a kennel. They're just too tall. And whereas heifers can be super short and squat, and they do fine. There's actually a couple of purebreds that I saw born the other day in Wasilla, and they're just beautiful, just little bricks. They're beautiful. Yeah. So yeah, that's you want to read the regulations, but they got to have identification on them, and the other thing to consider is they've got to be free of ectoparasites or treated within 10 days. So that's a big loophole, and need to be careful when those enter your herd, because just because someone doesn't see anything doesn't mean that there's not anything there.
Right.
And that's how those supersized lice came in a couple years ago. I found some lice, and I was like, wow, those is really big lice. I've never seen lice that big before. And I picked it up and put it in a bottle and sent it to Dr. Gerlach to have it speciated. I said, that's a louse, but I don't know about that. And sure enough, it was some crazy louse that never been found in the Pacific North or in the West Coast before or something, I don't know. And so it had, was a baby of one that had been brought up and then dispersed in the community. So it's probably all over the place now. But so you want to be aware of that. And sometimes the babies are too young to be treated with pesticides, that you can't, make them sick. Especially if you try to put pesticide ear tags on them, it'll make them really sick.
Right.
So
well, if I can get a few good does, I'm not opposed to AI. So maybe that would be a better route, just to try to improve already.
Now, goat AI, usually enough, is laparoscopic goat AI. It's really expensive, like ridiculous. The semen is insanely expensive, like more expensive than cattle semen. And a dose will be like between $40 and $150 or $200 a dose. It's crazy.
Seriously?
Yeah, seriously. And then you gotta bring it up here. Whereas cattle is, $10, $20, $30. My bull is selling for around, I don't know, $15, $20 right now. And they're really cheap. Sheep semen is also relatively cheap, even the imported stuff. But the problem is that the person who did the importing has aged out. I bought out his inventory, but that's all that anybody's going to be able to get for a while on a lot of those animals, which is a real crying shame. And I'm not sure that I have the time to go importing poop semen into Alaska unless somebody else wants to fit the bill. But I do have somebody coming up, a colleague coming up next summer to bring to help collect multiple species. And so I think that we're going to pick a few specific rams and go ahead and freeze them, because there are some animals here that are really nice animals. And so I may try to build our own inventory here, especially if it's from a herd that I know is MOV free. And that would be an interesting concept to go ahead and freeze our own semen here. I don't know. It's just an idea I have. We'll see how it flies.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
You bet. Yeah. Alrighty. Well, hopefully that covers it, and hopefully you all are ready to bring up sheep, because we need them. I want somebody to bring up milk sheep. I'm just dying to see milk sheep. Lupunes or East Frisians or something. They're just the coolest.
I've been playing with the thought that it's hard to find East Frisians that are from tested herds. Because
That are from
a lot
what?
of people it's hard to find East Frisians that are from tested herds.
Oh, yeah.
I've looked around a little bit, but and then they're not quite as hardy either, from what I've heard from people. So
No. The
It's
Lacunes,
tempting,
I
though.
think, are good. And my colleague that's coming up to help me collect rams next year has been breeding Lacunes. And they're supposed to
Lacan.
be.
Okay.
So, say it again.
Okay. Lacan.
Yeah, I think my son says it that way. I never had French.
It's okay.
Sorry,
Yeah,
I don't know.
it's. They also have been doing some Awasi and what's the other one? Breeding in some more of the Persian type sheep.
Yeah.
Into,
So for the
those are
people
more
that
hardy. So
thought about it, that one of the cool ideas behind a milking sheep is that the males are not quite as stinky as a male goat, and so having a male a ram around is sometimes a little more tolerable than having a male goat around, and the milk, I guess, is quite nice, and they're just a lot different. They're a little less vocal than goats are, which in a smaller community might be an interesting idea. So I don't know. I think it's a great idea. I'd like to see them.
yeah, I do too. That would be fun.
Yeah. So right on. All right. And so that's pretty much all I got then. Nobody's got any questions. Hopefully that covers it, and can't wait to see more sheep. And if people need help getting them up here, as I'm able to, I can try to help. And the shipping on the ones that are oversized is really pricey, so you need to make every effort to get them here while they're small. If you have to go full size, you should look at spending $1,000 to $2,000 a sheep to get them up here. They're very expensive to get up here once they're. It can be done. We just did it, but it's just very expensive. Alrighty, I think we're gonna duck out then. If anybody's got any questions, and we'll be happy to send me a message on Facebook, and I'll be happy to help you out. Hopefully that was helpful, and where's our meeting leader?
I just want to say thank you, and you have a cute little helper there.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Yes, you bet. All right, we're gonna hit the road. We gotta do another Zoom meeting here shortly. And thanks so much for coming, and can't wait to hear how the information comes back to me when it's been recorded and played again. Hopefully there's no errors in there. Have a good evening then. Good night.
Thank you, Sabrieta.
Thank you.
You bet.
And then Cody, I'm gonna